Oh, didn't see you there. I thought this mirror was very appropriate for today's video. Hi! If you've never been here, my name is Catherine, and I'm here to talk about books. Today is a very special video. Since I'm sort of new to BookTube, and some of you are just starting to get to know me, I thought it would be great to film a favorites video. I think this is just a good way for you to get to know me as a reader and kind of understand what the basis is for some of my other reviews and books that I'm seeking. Once you understand that these are my favorite books, you'll go, oh, okay. I get it. I get why she doesn't go for these types of books. I get why she goes for these types of books. You'll see. Everything will be made clear once you understand that these are my favorites. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There are still some that I've read maybe recently that are slowly becoming favorites, or there's some that I might look on this list later and be like, actually that's not. This is no means exhaustive. It is a long one, but it is not exhaustive by any means. This also is not in any particular order. I'm just gonna go through them kind of as they're on my list. I keep all of my bookkeeping, so to speak, on Notion, and that's where I keep this list. And these are books that are, you know, 5 stars, 5 out of 5, so beautiful, so wonderful. Books that I still, even though some of these I've read so long ago, I'm still thinking about, still mulling over. Scenes from some of these books will just pop in my head randomly. These are my favorites. These are my babies. I will say also, I'm not from Chicago originally, I'm from New Jersey, and some of my books are all the way in New Jersey. I'm going home soon and I might take some of them back with me, especially the ones on this list, because I just want these to be closer. So I have some physical books with me, but some I'll just insert the photo because I don't have them with me, and that's a shame. That's a darn shame. So yeah, sit back, grab a snack. Let's talk about my favorite books. First up, we have classic Bram Stoker Dracula. This is the cloth-bound edition. This poor cloth-bound edition. She's getting a little beat up because I read from this. Generally with cloth-bounds, I don't like to read from them, but I did on this one. I received this book when I was maybe in 8th grade or 9th grade. I remember getting it for Christmas. And I remember it was right when we were all kind of in our collective hangover about vampires. We had just come out of like the Twilight phase, and I remember picking this up and going, ugh, like vampires, I'm done with vampires. And my mom went, no, 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 no. She was like, this is the OG vampire story. That's not a direct quote. My mom did not say OG, but she said, no, this is the original. This is the original Dracula, this is the original vampire story, this is a certified classic, you have to read it. And so I kind of begrudgingly picked it up and was like, fine, like, I guess, like, how different could it be? And I was obsessed with it. So I read this in high school, just read it on my own accord, and I was obsessed. This is the story, the classic story, obviously, about Count Dracula in Transylvania, and about Jonathan Harker, who is going to investigate this count, this mysterious count. It's told, I'll put the word for it, I always mispronounce this word, epistolary? I think it's epistolary. It's told in letters and told in diary entries, which I always love those types of books. I love that setup, and this is so excellent. The atmosphere, the plot. I know a criticism of this book is people are like, the beginning of the plot is great and then it gets kind of weird and it falls apart, but I have to say the whole time I was invested and into it. So atmospheric and dark, and I just couldn't put it down. Like, I think I devoured this book in like 3 days. And I'd say for an 8th, 9th grader to read a book in 3 days, they're in it. I think it's time for a reread on this book. It's been a while, and I just think about it all the time. Like, I think about this book often, so Dracula. And to be fair, actually, I don't necessarily think this is the OG vampire story. I believe it's J. Sheridan Le Fanu, whoever wrote Camilla, basically, is kind of credited as being the first. But this, I'd say, is probably like, that one's more of a cult classic, whereas this one was like a grand slam success. Yes, it's the OG, but who's to say? We can debate that at a different time. Next is a very divisive one. People do not like this one. People famously hate this one, and famously, unfortunately, don't give it a chance. I think because the reputation precedes it and people are like, oh, I don't want to even touch that or even approach it. But I promise you, it's so good. You just have to go in with a completely open mind and just take your time. And that is Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Frickin' Moby Dick, man. Nobody gives this book its due. It's incredible. This tells the story, if you don't know, of Ishmael. He's just kind of wandering. He doesn't really know what to do with his life, so he joins a whaler, in a Nantucket whaler, in the middle of the 19th century. So basically their whole thing is to get on a ship and kill as many whales as possible to bring back whale oil. So it used to be a very lucrative business. So he joins this whaling ship, the Pequod, that's captained by Captain Ahhhhh. And Captain Ahhhhh, basically, the first day they're at sea, he gathers his crew, brings them all around. He goes, "Everyone, yes, you're here to kill whales, but also this is a revenge mission. You're all here for a revenge mission." And it's because this whale, this famed white whale, crashed a ship and ate my leg. So we're off to go get this whale and kill this great white whale they call Moby Dick. And so it is that story, but also this novel devolves into almost an encyclopedic novel about whales. You will learn more about whales than you ever thought you would learn. But I actually was fascinated by it. Even the way he wrote about the whales, I was like, yes, put me in, coach. I want to know about everything about whales. So it starts with Ishmael. It starts with as a very traditional 19th century novel, and then it goes like, and it starts to get really experimental. There's a part where he goes into all of the sailors, and it almost reads like a Greek chorus, almost like a play. He was just throwing things at the wall and trying to see what stuck, and he was really exploding what the 19th century novel could be. And if you put that mindset on it, you're in. You're golden. Like, you just have to go along on this kind of crazy ride, and you will be rewarded. The prose is amazing. Like, passages are just so intricately mastered and woven, but then there's some chapters where it's just a couple sentences long, like Captain Ahhhhh just stared at the sea and threw his pipe into the sea, and you're just like, yeah, and then it goes into the next chapter being completely different. It's a wild ride. You have to be patient with it. You have to really take your time and appreciate it, but it will reward you. I loved Moby Dick, and I want to do a whole video about like a guide to reading this, because I just think people need to give it more of a chance. That being said, if you don't like it, you don't like it. I mean, what can I do? But there's the door. You can go if you don't like this book. I'm kidding. Let me know in the comments if you have read this, if you're afraid to read this. Let me know. I love her. I just got a notification on my phone, time sensitive, from Instagram. Drake Bell started a live video. Oh yeah, that's time sensitive, all right. Anyway, next one. This one also I know some folks are not huge fans of, but I absolutely love this book. It's The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This one will kill you. This one will take your heart, cradle it, and you go, oh, how nice, and then he squashes it. So this is basically about these two twins. Their names are Esta and Rahel. They're very, like, mercurial, kind of strange. They're in their own little world, always doing their own thing. They almost have their own little languages, the twins kind of have. And their cousin Sophie from England comes to visit them. And it's about her coming in as kind of this outsider, coming into this Indian family and their dynamic. And there's also a man who comes and like works for the family and helps them out, and he befriends these children. He is part of the untouchable caste in India, so he technically really should not have any relations with anybody. They're really not supposed to engage with him or look at him, touch him. And it's about his relationship that he has with these children and with their mother, with just absolutely tragic consequences. This book gets absolutely tragic, but the writing in this, I reread this book last year for our book club, and I just got to like really delve into the language and the magical realism in this book. Because these two twins almost have their own little world and their own little language, it's written through their perspective. So they give things names that aren't necessarily their names, but they're creating meaning as they go. And the characters, like the lush writing and the lush descriptions of their environment and of the river that they live nearby, and the relationship between the man and their mother, like just like, it builds to such a pitch, and it just sits somewhere inside you. And reading this book again absolutely devastated me. I read it first in college just for fun, and I already loved it, and then I already knew it was like a 4.5, 5-star, and I read it again and I was like, we were right the first time. Like, we knew this book is absolutely brilliant. Love it or hate it, but I absolutely love it. The God of Small Things. Next up, I believe I got this book in the same haul as Dracula. So Santa Claus / for the non-believers, my mother did very well because this also was one of my favorite books of all time. This is not the original copy. This is a copy my boyfriend bought for himself. It's Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which you can tell because if it was my copy, it wouldn't have the little Netflix decal at the top, which can't be removed. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Absolute gothic, atmospheric suspense masterpiece. Every word in this, every moment in this is so wonderfully paced, so well done. Mwah, chef's kiss. If you have not seen the Alfred Hitchcock movie with Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine, what are you doing? One of the best movies of all time, and such an incredible adaptation of this book. I believe I had seen the movie first, and so I already knew the main story, but delving into the book, it was just even better. My cat's whining. Do you want to sit with me? You want to sit with me? So this tells the story, it's an unnamed narrator. She's a very young woman. She's traveling Europe with a chaperone. She's basically almost like her maid, or almost like her traveling companion that she's hired to do this for this older lady. And she meets this man named Maxim de Winter, and he's older than her. He's significantly older. He's in his 40s. She's probably in like her early 20s. And he's very, very cool, very mysterious, very romantic, and he kind of sweeps her off her feet. And just in a very whirlwind way, he proposes, and she's like, okay, I guess I'm marrying you. And so she goes to his estate called Manderley. And Manderley is maintained by this maid named Mrs. Danvers, who was obsessed with the previous wife, the previous Mrs. de Winter, whose name is Rebecca. So the fact you have an unnamed narrator, but you have the book being named after the original wife, like that should tell you a thing or two. And so slowly, the new Mrs. de Winter is figuring out what this Rebecca woman was, what Mrs. Danvers was to her, who she is now in this house. She's become this lady of this house, and she's not knowing really where she is. And it just gets crazy. It gets crazy bananas. It's so good. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. Gothic perfection, truly. If you want a good Gothic tale, you want something that's gonna move fast, just read this. Just read Rebecca. Please read Rebecca, I beg of you. Next is a book that I don't have, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Oh, so good. This is about Basil. He's a painter, and he's painting this portrait of Dorian Gray, who's kind of this young, kind of like foppish kind of man in late Victorian England. He's kind of just doing his thing. He's breaking hearts and he's taking names and he doesn't really care, but he's stunning. He's like an Adonis. He's this gorgeous young man. And Basil paints this portrait of him, and he, meaning Dorian, is like, you know, this portrait is so perfect of me. I look so perfect. I wish I could just stay young forever. And what he doesn't realize is that he just basically made a pact, and so he doesn't age. As he starts to get older, he realizes he's staying the same age on the outside, but the painting of him starts to age. And so it's this crazy story about morality, about vanity, about youth, and the corruption of the soul. Like how the painting is actually a symbol of what he's like on the inside, and it's turning into rot and into decay, because as he never ages, that affects his relationships with other people, his relationships in London, and how he engages with the world. And so it's just a great commentary on just how the soul itself can just completely erode and become disgusting, even though us on the outside, we take so much stock and pride into our youth and into our appearance. And it's so good. Love Oscar Wilde. Love anything that man did. He was one of our great geniuses, unjustly prosecuted for being who he was and for being just so outspoken and just being just a wit. But he was one of the greats, and this book is, I think, his only novel, if not one of his very few. He was mostly a playwright and mostly a poet, but this is one of his few novels. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5,000 stars. Just so good. So good. I want to pick this up actually very soon, because it was so good. Picture of Dorian Gray. Yes. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Oh, The Color Purple. The Color Purple. If you haven't read this yet, please, I beg of you. This actually was suggested at our book club, but it was one of those books that everyone was like, oh yes, we've read The Color Purple. So unfortunately, the woman who suggested it, she was kind of like, I understand. I understand this might have been one that everybody has read, but I hadn't read it yet. And I was like, oh, I was like, if it gets picked, I will read it again. So this is about two sisters, but it's mostly about Celie, who's the sister that stays home while the other sister becomes a missionary in Africa. And she starts writing these letters to her sister, and she's writing these letters also to God. And it's, so again, it's a letter writing epistolary, maybe I got that. And it's about Celie. She's been abused by her father for years, and then she enters into this really horrible marriage, and it's just about her coming into herself and finding agency through that, through a woman who comes to stay with them and live with them, and they form a relationship, and it's just so lovely. So it's about sisterhood, it's about queer relationships, it's about finding your own inner strength and finding your own... Hi! You like the color purple? It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous novel. I don't know why Steven Spielberg directed it, but if you've seen the movie made me weep. The book made me weep. It's absolutely gorgeous. Unfortunately, in later years, Alice Walker has some interesting ideas about things. I don't agree with her thinking about a lot of things, but with this book, she really hit it out of the park, and I think it stands on its own. So, The Color Purple. Can't suggest it enough. It's so excellent. Ooh. We had a copy of this laying around because my boyfriend just read it, but I can't find it. He may have already donated it, he may have given it away. It's Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Any white woman that loves classics loves this book. Like, I don't think I make the rules here. I think this is just the standard, the classic, for a reason. It's absolutely excellent. This is about Jane. She grows up kind of an orphan. She's taken in by these, I believe it's her aunt, or it's some kind of distant relatives, and she's treated horribly. Like, she's just treated like, literally like the stepchild or like the unwanted child. And when she gets older, she doesn't really have much to do. And in that time, in the 19th century, if you didn't have prospects, you were a little bit screwed. She becomes a governess for this man, Mr. Rochester, and she's helping teach his ward. And then things happen. And then a lot of things happen. If you know, you know the spoiler. I am not going to reveal the twist just in case there are you on here that have not read Jane Eyre. If you haven't read Jane Eyre, get out of here. Go read it, come back to me, and then we'll talk, because it's required reading. It's absolutely required reading. Again, the atmosphere that Charlotte Bronte is able to maintain, the plot is so well done. The relationship between Jane and Mr. Rochester, although Mr. Rochester is not someone I swoon over, I think he is not the greatest man to have ever lived, but just their relationship and how they understand each other and how their relationship develops throughout the book is just done so well. The twist is insane. I read this when I was in maybe 8th grade or 9th grade, and I remember where I was sitting when I found out. I literally went, I was so shook by it. And so the fact it was able to do that, and it's a book that was written in the 1840s, 1850s, impressive. So, Jane Eyre. And if you've read Jane Eyre, then go read Wide Sargasso Sea. Wide Sargasso Sea is not one of my favorite books. I think it's like maybe creeping towards this list, but I'm still mulling over it, and I'm still thinking about it if it is. So go read Wide Sargasso Sea. Only if you've read Jane Eyre. I would read them in that order, even though technically Wide Sargasso Sea is a prequel. Read Jane Eyre first and then read Wide Sargasso Sea. It'll give you a much better appreciation. Oh yes, a book that I don't have with me, but it's only right that I pick a favorite Jane Austen. It's hard because I love Jane Austen. I love all the things I've read by her. There's some that I felt a little bit more like about Northanger Abbey. That one didn't hit me, but the ones that have hit me are particularly Pride and Prejudice, for obvious reasons, Emma, for obvious reasons. I even love Mansfield Park, and no one really talks about that one or seems to love that one, but I really liked it. But the one that takes the cake, the one that for me is the favorite, is Sense and Sensibility. This is her first novel. This is about these two sisters. There's a third sister, but it's really about the two older sisters. Their father has died, and he's left them with nothing. Like, it's their mother, it's the two of them, and then their younger sister, Margaret, and they have nothing. And so they are like, we have to figure out what to do. They move into this new house in the country, and it's about them just basically finding their way and trying to get married, which is the object of every Jane Austen novel. So it's called Sense and Sensibility because Eleanor, who's the older sister, is the one that has a little bit more sense. Like, she's very practical, she's very logical, she has her emotions, she thinks, under control, and like, no, I'm a master of my emotions. Her younger sister, Marianne, is the sensibility side of things, so she feels so much. She's all feeling. She's spontaneous, she's impulsive. Jane Austen's kind of exploring like these two sides of women and how they navigate this issue of trying to find a good match when they are almost destitute, which at that time period was a problem. That was a big problem, but I love this story. I absolutely love this story. It's a sister's story, and I love a sister story because I have a sister. So any book about sisters I'm always drawn to, but this one, like, their relationship is so beautiful and so lovely because they contrast each other so well and they're so dedicated to one another. Again, it's a classic Jane Austen novel in that the characters are just so well rendered. You could tell she like spent such time, and or these were people that she knew. Like, she was modeling them all off people who were sitting in her parlor while she was writing. Colonel Brandon. Alan Rickman plays Colonel Brandon in the movie, and I love him so much. This might not be everybody's favorite. People usually go between Pride and Prejudice and Emma, but Sense and Sensibility is definitely mine. It has a very special place. Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. You want a little bit of Victorian sensationalism, The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. An unsung hero. A truly unsung Victorian hero is Wilkie Collins. He was kind of the first to do Victorian sensationalist novels, which is kind of its own subgenre of Victorian novels. The sensationalist novel is like very bent on really causing a sensation or just having these insane plots that are meant to scare you or meant to enthrall you. They usually involve murder and ghosts and intrigue and all the like. The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins is excellent. That's like considered one of the first detective novels. That one's really good, but the one that I hold near and dear is The Woman in White. It's about this man, I believe his name is Walter, and he goes to serve as a painting instructor and a drawing instructor to this woman in this large mansion named Laura. It's been a long time since I read this book, so some of the names might be escaping me, and I also don't have the book with me. But when he's there, he's just noticing some weird stuff going on. Like, there's a weird woman in white out on the grounds, and who is she? Why is she there? Is she a ghost? We don't know. There's also a man who's pursuing Laura, and you can just tell he's not a nice guy, but he's pursuing her obviously to marry her, to get her fortune, and it's about Walter kind of navigating all of that. So good. Definitely pure sensationalism, because there's just so much going on that you're like, fainting, but still so well done. Like, that doesn't detract from the language of the book or doesn't detract from the writing of the book at all. It's still, the writing standard is still so high, and so it's such good literature, but yet is still so fun and so engaging. So if you're looking for like a good spooky read, it's a long spooky read. Like, I think this book is probably about 800 pages, but worth it. Like, so well worth it. I didn't even really feel like it was that long. Like, I was speeding through it so quickly. Woman in White, Wilkie Collins. Do not pass up Wilkie Collins. No Wilkie Collins slander in the comments. I love this man. Next up, we have this book. My boyfriend just bought it. This is not the copy that I read from, but he wanted to read it, and again, it's at home in New Jersey. It's 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. You want magical realism, you want lush writing, you want almost like out of worldly but still relatable characters. You want a family drama that starts the book with a family tree, because that's how you know things are gonna get crazy, is when there's a family tree. You want this book. This is about the Buendia family, and it basically just spans their life and their time. You can't even describe this book. Like, I can't even get into the plot or get into what happens. There's just so much that happens. And I would just remember reading this one summer. I was sitting on the porch at my house and I couldn't stop. Like, I started and I couldn't stop. I just kept going, and I think I read like 100 pages in one sitting. I was just so invested in it. Justice for the Woman Who Eats Dirt. That's all I'm gonna say. His writing is absolutely excellent. If you wind up reading this and liking it, I also recommend Love in the Time of Cholera. Not one of my favorites, but so good. So, 100 Years of Solitude. So excellent. Oh, I don't have this book with me. I don't have it with me, but I think I'm gonna take it back with me when I go home. It's Just Kids by Patti Smith. Another one where I was like, God damn it. So excellent. This is a memoir by Patti Smith, who we know obviously is a famous singer-songwriter. Her album Horses I listened to while I was reading this, and it just made it. And this is about her living in New York in the late 60s, early 70s, when she is, like, definition starving artist. Like, she literally has no money, just trying to live off her art. And there was a point where she lives in the Chelsea Hotel, which is a very famous hotel in Manhattan. That was a hotel, but was also a home for a lot of artists at the time. And it's about her living in New York with, he's like an artistic companion, sort of lover, best friend, Robert Mapplethorpe, who was actually a gay artist living in New York at the time. And they joined together and they lived together, and it's about their relationship until, I mean, this isn't a spoiler. If you look up anything about Robert Mapplethorpe, you'll see he died of complications with AIDS in, I believe, the early 80s. So this is about their relationship and then his eventual passing, and her reflecting on that time with him and the importance of that relationship to her, not only as an artist, but as a person. I'm, like, getting emotional thinking about it right now. Like, I just was so taken by that book. Patti Smith was a big inspiration for a project I did in college, theater project that I did, and I read this book as kind of like a foundational text before launching into this project, and it just provided such a great emotional basis for the work I was doing, and was so inspiring that there was someone in her life that filled her in this way, filled her with so much companionship and friendship and belonging, but also was artistically someone that she looked up to and worked with. And her writing is just so good. Like, obviously we know her as a poet. She basically put poetry to music, and she's one of our greatest living poets I think we have. But like the poetry infused in this memoir is just so beautiful. And if you don't cry by the end, I don't know. Go read this book, please, please. Especially if you're someone who's not really into memoirs. This feels different. This almost feels, it's a work of art. And not to say that other memoirs are not works of art. This just like is a departure from the usual memoir, I'd say, because of just the quality of writing is just so stunning. It's so stunning. So, just kids. I can't recommend it enough. Oh, fun little copy. This is definitely the copy I read from. It's Sophie's Choice. There's no cover. When I first moved to Chicago in 2019, this was the first book I picked up in a little free library. So I've seen many copies since. Actually, the same exact movie tie-in copy in bookstores, in used bookstores. And every time I go, you know, I probably should get a nicer copy of Sophie's Choice because I love this book so much. And then I go, well, no, I feel attached. Like, I feel very attached to this copy that literally, like, there's no cover and it's falling apart. But even the smell of it just evokes memories of, like, being in a new city and figuring my life out. This book does not get enough credit, I think. Unfortunately, Sophie's Choice has kind of become shorthand or kind of a joke almost, like, it's the old Sophie's Choice, but we've divorced that from the actual heart of what this book is. So this is basically about a man living in Brooklyn. This would be in like the 50s, maybe early 60s, and he befriends this man in his building who is in a relationship with this woman named Sophie, who is a Polish immigrant to the United States. And they start to learn, so the relationship Sophie's in with this man is very volatile, and it's an abusive relationship, and it's not great. And the other man, who is the main narrator and is a writer, whose name is escaping me, he is like starting to get to know Sophie and kind of falling in love with Sophie, and is finding out about her past and what brought her to the United States, because she is a Holocaust survivor. If you know the choice, then you know the choice. And I have to say, reading this book, I'm going into it going, I know what the choice is. It's very famous at this point. But even when I did get to that, it still went like, like it's still like, because at that point I had gotten to know her so well. And I was so devastated. It was so horrible. I still have never seen the movie. I've never seen the movie with Meryl Streep. I want to watch it, but I think I also want to reread this at some point. I was so swept up in this book and so taken by it. It's so tragic and so sad, but beautifully rendered. I'd see no one talking about this book, but I think it needs to be spoken of. Oh, and I didn't even say the author. Sophie's Choice, William Styron. Really excellent. Excellent. This video is like 5,000 hours long, but it's just because I can't not talk. Next, this copy is kind of strange. It's gonna look like another book, but it's because it has two novels in it. It's Great Expectations. Not Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations. This is actually not the copy I read from. This is actually a copy from Borders. Rest in peace, Borders. I bought this when Borders was going out of business back when I was in middle school. So I got this very cool, like, double copy. It has Tale of Two Cities. If you go to the back, it has Great Expectations. So Great Expectations, dare I say, is in the top 3 of books I've read. Like, so absolutely good, and it's what kicked me off into reading all the rest of the Dickens that I've read, some of which has been fantastic, Dombey and Son and David Copperfield, and then it's also led me down to read some books that I despise, aka Martin Chuzzlewit and Old Curiosity Shop. But Great Expectations is one of my favorite novels of all time. Ugh. It's so good. It's about this boy named Pip. He is an orphan, but he lives with his sister, who's an adult, and married to this man named Joe. And he's kind of going about his life. He's probably going to become a blacksmith, just like his brother-in-law, Joe. However, there's a very mysterious rich old lady in town who enlists him to come over and to basically be a companion to this girl that she's raising. She's sort of her ward. But this girl that she's raising her to hate men. This girl, Estella. It's about Pip and his relationship with these two ladies and how he kind of comes into this money. He doesn't know where this money comes from at all, but he comes into a fortune, and how he is turning into a gentleman. It's about class, just like any Dickens novel is about class, but it's about class, it's about finding out who you are in the differences in class, obviously about love and about relationships. And Pip is just such a great character. Like, Pip, you just want the best for him, and you want to follow him around as he goes through life and goes through these trials and tribulations. And like any Dickens novel, there are some fantastic characters in this. Miss Havisham, who is that eccentric old lady, and Estella are great characters. Joe, the blacksmith that he is friends with, is just so lovely and so sweet. His sister is a bit something. Because it's a great Dickens novel, and this is one of the great Dickens novels, you just really come to love the characters and get to know them. And I just loved every minute of this book. I read it during the pandemic, which was the kind of the perfect time to read it because I could really concentrate on it, and I just loved it. And so it's one of my favorite books of all time. So again, this doesn't really look like it, but if you read the fine print, Great Expectations is in here. Ah, yes. Another book that we had somewhere, but again, I think my boyfriend may have donated it because it wasn't my original copy. It's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So we got 2 Brontes on this list. Ugh, the drama. You want drama? You want drama. You want Wuthering Heights. Emily Bronte was going through it. This is the one novel she wrote. She was mostly known for her poems. If she was known at that time, she was very obscure during her life. It wasn't until her death that people were like, oh, this bitch can cook. But she wrote one novel. It was Wuthering Heights, and she knocked it out of the park. So this is about Catherine and Heathcliff. Catherine Earnshaw is a girl with a father who they have land, but they're not like super wealthy. They're like doing okay. But her father brings this boy Heathcliff that he kind of just finds at the docks, just like this random little lad. He decides to bring him home because he feels bad for him. And so Heathcliff is raised alongside Catherine and her brother. And it's about Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship and how it gets tested by all of these other people who come in, this kind of neighboring estate that Catherine and her brother kind of become friends with these people. So this one's really about class, kind of thinly veiled about race. It's ambiguous what Heathcliff's racial origins are. It's kind of implied he might have Romani or Gypsy blood in him. It's unsure. So there's definitely like a thinly veiled racist element to it all that I think scholars are looking more into now. And it's just about otherness. It's about just like pure, like such devotion and love that gets really ugly and gets really possessive and jealous to the point it bewitches you, and it turns ghostly, because this gets very ghostly. Go on, haunt me then. Like, is this an ideal relationship? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is not one where I'm like, oh, they're a perfect couple. No, but I think the whole point is that it's not, that it is very ugly, but that these two know each other body and soul and know each other so well that when they are rendered apart, they can't be, like almost that their souls have to be together. It's so emo. It's so emo and so like raw. Again, that you just go, Emily, like what the heck was going on? She was just probably just so angsty on those moors with almost no company. It's just excellent. The writing is so good. It's told through a very interesting narrative. It starts as a man needs lodging for the night, so he stays at this house, and he gets the story from the maid of all of these people. So you're getting the story like third hand, maybe even fourth hand, and so that part of it is very odd, but it makes it so that it almost becomes mythical. Like it almost like, did this happen? I don't know. It's so good. It's so good. I think my boyfriend was like, yeah, this is good. I was like, yeah, but I read this when I was a 13-year-old girl. Like I read this when I was 13 and I was like, this is it. This is everything. So I'm gonna read it again at some point. I think it's time for me to get back to it. I'm always afraid to reread books that I love because I'm afraid I'm gonna be like, oh, I don't love this now nearly as much. But I hope that's not the case because I love it. Next is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. I had to read this for high school. I read this in sophomore year of high school for English. And I remember being like, okay, like this seems a little bit odd to pick as a school choice and a little bit out there because it's kind of sci-fi, maybe, but I loved it. Like I devoured it. This is about Billy Pilgrim. He's in World War II, so he was in the army on the German front in World War II. And then he later is able to travel through time and through space, and he meets the Tralfamadorians. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't know. But they are these aliens that have kind of abducted him and are using him kind of as a specimen. And it's just a crazy ride. This is like a crazy, trippy ride. It's very non-linear. It's more so Kurt Vonnegut's just kind of posing these ideas, and Billy Pilgrim really is just like a stand-in for man. But it's excellent. This is such an excellent read. It also just shows the horrors of war through this very specific lens. The bombing of Dresden is like a huge point in the book and like a huge historical event that's used to examine kind of the horrors of war. It's very satirical. It's Kurt Vonnegut really pulling the leg. This I want to pick up soon again because it's such a quick read. It's got to be less than, it's probably only 200 pages, 250 pages. It's very short. And his prose is very like Vonnegut doesn't spend a lot of time being very flowery or going to things. He just moves things very quickly. But I just remember my mind being like opened up by this book and realizing what books could do, or like what a story could be, or what a war story could be. Because to me, my standard was All Quiet on the Western Front for war stories, which is an excellent book, really excellent book, but that is very typical war story. Like that is like man in the trenches figuring out what is life. Whereas this took that and completely expanded it into, no, it could be a story about aliens, but we're really talking about World War II. That just made me go, oh. And so it goes. Oh yes, yes. This I read a long time ago. I read in 8th grade. My teacher had a copy, and I remember being so tempted to take it because it was this nice hardcover, but I felt that it had her address in it, and I was like, I can't take it, but I want it. But when I was in Santa Fe for a wedding in September, I found this in a little free library, and I went, I'm finally gonna own this book, A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. You know when I've said a couple videos back that I don't like romance books? I like if there's romance in it, but I don't like set romance books. I eat my words with this book because this is definitely more so like marketed romance. However, it's written in early 20th century. That means it's better. That's just my own biases working. This is about Lucy. She's a young woman and she's kind of like figuring out, you know, it's this turn of the century, so she has limited things she can do with her life. She's probably just going to have to get married. But she goes to Italy for this trip and she's kind of figuring out who she is. And she meets this young other English, so she's English and this is another Englishman she meets there named George. And they strike up a friendship. Are they kind of interested in each other? Maybe. But then she returns back to England and she is supposed to marry this other guy who I believe his name is Cecil. In the movie I was like, oof, I don't like him. You're meant to not really like him, but she is kind of obligated to marry this man because he is of her social standing, whereas George is a little bit below her social standing. But it's about her coming of age and it's about her coming into herself and making a decision on what she wants and who she wants to spend her life with. And I just remember loving this. Like I loved it so much. I was so taken by it. I loved Lucy. I saw myself in her. It takes more color from the outdoors and more charm from human absurdity, and the quality of its comedy is more romantic, but the comedy is also shot through with a sense of melodramatic evil, which is more frightening in its gratuitousness. Forster is wonderfully accurate in his perception of the failures in human relationships, and he accurately names causes. That's very interesting. It's so good. I also just love that I found this copy. This is like a very old edition of this book. Oh, are you not going to tell me? You're not going to tell me. That's rude. It's not going to tell me what year this was published. But yes, Room with a View. And the last time I read this, I was, again, 13 or 14. Are you noticing? A lot of the books that I've read, I was 13 or 14, but that's, I think, just when I was so new to classics and my heart was so open and ready for them that then these just came in and they have never left. I'm ready to reread this one. I'm really ready. We've come to our last book. This is the most recent addition to my favorites because it's the most recent that I've read. I've thought about it. We discussed it with the committee. We went over it, we reviewed it, and we have decided, yes, this is definitely a new favorite. The bombing of Dresden has begun. I'm also just going to build the suspense for you. What is this last book? This is not the last time we're going to talk about this book. I probably am going to bring it up all the time and might make a whole dedicated video to it. Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. If I get buried, if that's how I decide I want to be laid to rest, literally just put this book right here. I'm literally just going to be, or put it under my head, like use it as my pillow. I don't want to be separate from this book at all. I love this book so much. I grew up loving the musical. I think I first saw the musical when I was 9 or 10. So I've known the story for a very long time. I've always loved the story, loved the characters, loved the drama, obviously, of it, loved the music. It's one of my favorite musicals of all time. So I always knew in the back of my mind, I was like, I am gonna read the book at some point. I will definitely read Les Mis at some point before I die. And I was putting it off. And then for some reason last year, I was just like, no. It was like an intuitive pick. I went, no, I know I'm gonna read it this year. Like I'm gonna read it in summer and I'm gonna do it. I did. I picked it up in August. I finished it in October, took my sweet time, and it rewarded me. This book, like how do I even describe? Like you can't even begin to describe this book. Really at the heart, there's tons of characters, tons of side plots, tons of essays. But at the heart of it all is Jean Valjean. He's convicted for stealing a loaf of bread, famously, and then he tried to escape prison. So all of that added up, he's in prison for 19 years, but he is finally released. At the very beginning of the book, he's released, and he's just trying to make his way. He's trying to make his way in the world. He comes back to his relationship with God, and so he is a character who doesn't necessarily comply with the laws at the time, but he is complying with his own morality and his own faith in God. And Victor Hugo's kind of making a little bit of a point there. But Jean Valjean is going through the French countryside and into Paris, making his way at a very interesting time in French history. So this is after Napoleon, and when the monarchy is reinstated, which I always forget that happened. And then I'm like, oh shoot, yeah, we go back to having a monarch. And then it leads up to this very, very tiny, not well-known rebellion in Paris in, I believe, 1834 or 35. Very little known rebellion that takes place with these students in the streets of Paris, but that becomes kind of the climax of the book. And this is so good. So good. The writing in this, the characters you absolutely love. The prose itself is not, you might think this is like, oh shoot, this is gonna be pages and pages of like Victorian era dense writing. No, actually, he wrote it very accessibly. This was serialized and it was put out to the mass public. So the writing is actually very Spartan. It just gets to the plot and it gets all the points out to the point that he'll make a point and then he's like, will kind of explain what he meant. And I'm like, no, I get you, but he was explaining it to people who maybe have never had these ideas before. He also goes into these like long tangents about certain topics. You will know more about the Battle of Waterloo than you ever thought you'd know. You know more about the Paris sewer system than you thought you'd ever know. People don't like that about this book, but I loved it. I loved it. I was like, tell me more. Because even though it may seem like they're extraneous, they all serve to set the scene. He sets the scene with these crazy long, what feels like tangents, but really are essays to set the scene perfectly. And then you go, oh, you have way more appreciation for the scene that then transpires because you have all of that context. unbelievable. He does this so well. I finished this and just bawled, and then I went, no, I don't want it to be over. And so then I keep flipping through sometimes and I look and I go, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, yes, the good ship Orion. My boyfriend's reading it now, and every so often I go, what chapter are you on? And then he'll tell me and I go, oh, you're with, oh, yes. Like, I just want to go back into this book and live in it and be with these characters and just be with Victor Hugo more. I just love it so much. I love it so much. I am planning on reading War and Peace later this year, which I know is similar. Like, there's a lot of battle scenes, there's like, Tolstoy goes on these long essays, but then also it's about the relationships of these characters against this backdrop of this historical time period. So I'm so excited for that because I love this one so much. So, Les Miserables, the Miserables. So yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Those are my favorite books of all time. Again, not an exhaustive list. There's ones that if you bring them up to me, I'm gonna go, oh, love that one. And this is a never-changing list. There's some that may get taken off, there may be some that get put on. So this might be a video I may revisit in a little while and see where we're at with them. But this should just give you a good foundation as to what I love and what I love to read and what books and stories have just stayed with me. And, you know, is the reason that I started this channel is because I want to so passionately talk about these books that I know others love as well. So if you do love any of these books, please let me know. I would love to discuss them with you. I would love to discuss these books further. If I didn't think I would bore you, this video would be 2 hours long because I just love them so much. So please let me know your favorite books in the comments below. Please let me know just your favorites in general and see maybe I've read them. Maybe I also forgot to put them on my favorites list. I don't know. But if you've come this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate you watching to the end. Like, comment, subscribe, share it, do whatever you'd like. And I'll be here and I'll be talking about books. Bye.